I was backpacking in old Nordic country in my college years when this happened. It was supposed to be the trip of a lifetime with my greatest pals, but what we saw changed our lives forever. In the Nordic cold environment, there's nothing more important than staying warm. This was the first thing the locals told us when we arrived in the small, quaint town. They also warned us not to disturb any of the protective measures surrounding the village, lest we let in a horrible trickster beast. We laughed it off, these kooky Nords believing in fairy tale nonsense. Nevertheless, we didn't destroy the ritual objects and carried on diligently through the wood. We'd packed all of our gear: kindling, fire starters, sleeping bags, and plenty of food and water for the journey ahead. Spirits were high as we marched through the dark wood. This was a dream come true after so many months of hard work. All of a sudden, the weather changed. Thick gray clouds appeared above us at abnormal speed. What had once been a sunny day turned stormy in the blink of an eye. We were at the center of an unforgiving storm, with no way to turn back. My friend Kyle took out his compass, but it spun wildly in circles. We couldn't tell which way was which, so we decided to keep going on what we thought was the path. Just in time as the sun set, we stumbled on a wooden cabin. It was clearly abandoned. The pine wood siding was splintered and badly weathered, but it looked mostly intact. The windows were obviously broken, but had been boarded up. I noticed a rune on the door, deeply faded, but still clear under years of abuse.
"This wasn't on the map,"
said Kyle. I got a bad feeling in my gut, but the weather was so bad that we had no choice but to seek shelter inside. We forced the door open and took a look at our new refuge. The floorboards creaked under our weight as we walked around.
"This place is giving me the creeps!"
My friend Ben made sure to chime in.
"Don't be so dramatic."
My friend Saskia rolled her eyes.
"At least we're out of that horrible storm. Now let's see about starting a fire and warming up properly."
We were able to get a small fire going in the wood stove. It looked like it hadn't been used for centuries, but with our kindling, it was just like new. Exhausted from the day's journey, we took out our sleeping bags and tried to get some much-needed shut-eye. We all said goodnight and lost consciousness. It must have been several hours later when I heard it. Stones rapping on the window. It was such a strange noise that it broke me from my sleep, and I wasn't the only one. When I looked to my side, all my friends were clutching their sleeping bags to their chests and staring at the window on the side of the building. I got an eerie feeling in my stomach, and my sweat dropped. The others didn't look much better. Ben was the first to speak.
What was that sound?"
Like clockwork, there it was again.
"It's probably just a branch,"
said Saskia, but she looked scared.
"Let's just go back to sleep."
The storm continued to swirl and rage outside. None of us could look away from the window. There it was again. Unmistakable. There was a presence afoot. Kyle suddenly stood up and, to everyone's surprise, approached the window.
What are you doing?
Ben shrieked. Kyle replied, weirdly calm.
We'll just see what it wants,
He said.
It could be a villager coming to check on us.
I doubted that, but Kyle moved faster than I could speak. He ripped off the boards covering the window and peered into the night. That's when things took a turn for the worse. A shadowy figure with an undeniable sparkle in his eyes hovered at the edge of eyesight. Kyle was frozen in his tracks when the figure cried out in a high-pitched voice like the devil himself.
Kyle!
It beckoned playfully.
Come and play with me!
To our shock, Kyle began to climb out the window. We all yelled for him to stop, but it was like he was in a trance. An invisible force drew him towards the creature while it giggled and pranced in delight. We didn't dare move, lest the creature call for us next. We cried out for him to stop, but to no avail. Kyle had walked into the treacherous storm. We stayed frozen in place until the sun rose the next day. The storm dissipated shortly after Kyle and the figure disappeared, but we didn't dare move until daylight. We scurried right back to the village, looking for any sign of hope that Kyle might still be out there on the way. Maybe he made it back to town before us, but when we arrived to the town square, none of the locals had seen him. When we shared our story, they all shared somber, knowing looks, but they refused to tell us anything. All they would say is that our friend was gone. Saskia wouldn't let it rest that easily. We set off in the direction of the local watering hole, Thor's Hammered. It was the most popular bar in town. Sure enough, the place was hopping when we walked in, even in the middle of the day. We went straight to the barkeep. Saskia wasted no time explaining our plight. To our frustration, he looked spooked and threatened to kick us out of the bar if we spoke about it again. Just as we were about to lose all hope, we heard another voice through the chatter.
So you had a run-in with the Star Man.
A low, old voice reverberated and the bar fell silent.
Starman? Who are you? And what is that?
Ben asked shakily, quivering at the thought.
The name's Nick. As for him, some people say he's nothing more than an old legend, but those of us who've heard him know better.
The old figure spoke from the dim corner as we meandered over to the table and sat down.
You can never say his name. Even speaking of him is dangerous. Your friend is a lost cause, but now you need to be able to protect yourselves. He won't stop until he gets what he wants. And what might that be?
Saskia inquired.
A playmate.
The elder said gravely.
He never has them for longer than a night. That's why he keeps coming back. It starts with throwing rocks at your window in the night. Tap. 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 Stories say that long ago, he was a little boy who was exiled from his village for being an orphan and a trickster. Every night, he would sneak back and beg his old friends to come play with him, but nobody would. One night, during a particularly bad storm, he didn't just throw rocks. He went inside and took the child with him. The storm covered their tracks, and they couldn't start a search until it cleared the next day. Eventually, the search party found the two bodies frozen in a small cave. They had both been dead for hours, but the kidnapped child was bloody and wounded, as if pelted with small pebbles or stones. The mournful villagers took the innocent boy's body back to the village for a proper burial, but left the orphan boys in the woods. Some villagers who worried about evil spirits went back for the body, but to their horror it was gone. Since then, everybody in the village knows never to answer the stones. If you do, the curse of Starman will never leave you. He'll follow you forever until you play his twisted game.
We were all horrified by what had happened to our friend. We knew that if we searched for his body, it would only end in our demise. Still, I am haunted by what we saw in the woods that night. I wish we could have gone back for Kyle, but every time I think that, I see that silver glimmer flash before my eyes. Some nights, I can still hear the taps outside my window and his high-pitched voice beckoning me to play, but I will never succumb to the call of the Starman.